Welcome to today's webcast, Continuous Deployment with Release Management and TFS 2013. My name is Colin Dembowski and I'm an ALM MVP based in East London, South Africa. My Twitter handle is @ColinDembowski and I blog regularly to colinsalmcorner.com. I work for a company called Imaginet. Before we start today's webcast, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Imaginet. We have over 650 successful ALM customers and over 1,800 successful ALM engagements. We're a Microsoft Gold certified partner with the ALM competency, and in 2011 we were Microsoft's ALM Partner of the Year. We have only the highest level of expertise with Microsoft ALM technologies and a close working relationship with Microsoft. On staff, we have multiple Microsoft Regional Directors, TFS Rangers, Virtual Technical Specialists, and many Microsoft MVPs. Today we're going to look at delivering continuous value with release management. We're going to look at release management's architecture and terminology, and then we'll go into a demo where we'll set up a release management pipeline and deploy an application through the pipeline. Before we go any further, let's look at the problem statement. Typically, developers are going to do some coding and then have some sort of mechanism to build and package their application. They're then going to provision some sort of environment where they can deploy that package to. Once the deployment is done, some sort of testing is going to occur, whether that's automated testing, load testing, or manual testing. That's going to provide some feedback back to the developers who are going to do some more coding, build a new package, re-provision if necessary, redeploy, and do the testing. And so we get this continuous loop from code all the way through to deployment and testing. In reality, there's going to be numerous deployments and test cycles before a particular deployment is approved to go out into production. Now, tracking and coordinating this process becomes more and more complicated as the team and complexity of your application increases. Release management allows us to track and manage this entire pipeline. You may have seen this diagram before. It depicts the build, measure, learn cycle. Our requirements are represented in a backlog, and the team is going to iterate through the top items on that backlog to eventually release some working software. That is then going to be deployed into production, where the operations team is going to monitor that application, users are going to use that application, and eventually feedback from that cycle is going to come back as new items on the backlog. Team Foundation Server provides tools for managing 4 major buckets. There's the plan bucket, there's a host of development tools, and in the operations, there's integration with System Center as well as performance event monitoring. What we're going to focus on today is the tools in the release space, including integrated release management and configuration-based deployments. Deployment starts with a build of some sort. You get the best integration experience by using TFS build, but you can also use an external build engine that produces some packages for you. The idea is to take that one build and deploy it through a pipeline, first into dev typically, then into a number of other environments until we reach the production environment. We want to make sure we use the same build package each time so that we're absolutely confident of the quality of that one particular build package. Let's have a look at the release management architecture. At the heart of release management is the release management server. Then you're going to provision some machines and group those machines into environments. In this example, there's a dev environment and a QA environment. On each of those machines, a release management agent is installed. The agent is responsible for executing workflows on the machine as coordinated by the release management server. Finally, there's the client components. There's a WPF application used for setting up and configuring release management, and there's also a web application that can be used for approvals. Let's have a look at release management terminology. Under administration, you'll be able to set up users and groups, as well as what are called pick lists, for example, stage type. Stage types are how you define your pipeline stages, like dev, QA, and prod. Under Inventory, there are two sections: Tools, to allow you to upload executables or scripts into release management, as well as Actions, which are parameterized activities that can be performed. Release management comes with a host of built-in inventory, but you can create your own tools and actions as well. Paths define several things. Firstly, servers. These are the servers that have the release management agents installed. Environments group the servers together. And finally, paths, which show how your application flows from environment to environment. Under Applications, you define components. These are the pieces of your application, for example, a website, as well as release templates. The release template is the workflow for deploying your application through the pipeline. And finally, under Releases, you'll see any invocations of a release template. Let's quickly look at the deployment phases. There are 4 deployment phases for each deployment stage. The phases are acceptance, deployment, validation, and approval. I have an example here where we've got 3 stages: dev, QA, and prod. When a build is available, we're going to select an automated acceptance into the dev environment. This will in turn kick off the workflow, which is automated, and that's going to deploy the application into the dev environment. We're going to automate the validation and then ask Adam to do an approval so that Adam can approve that everything is okay in the dev environment. Once Adam has given approval, we're going to go into the QA stage. Again, we've automated the acceptance phase, which is going to kick off the deployment workflow into the QA environment. We're automating the validation again, and then we're going to pause for the QA team, any member of the QA team, to do an approval on the QA deployment. Once the approval is obtained from the QA team, we're going to go into production. For the production stage, we've decided not to automate the acceptance step, but we're going to pause and ask Brian to accept the deployment into the production environment. This will allow him to schedule, if he so chooses, or deploy immediately, as well as make sure everything is ready for the deployment. Once he accepts the deployment, the workflow is going to kick off, doing the deployment to the production environment. Then instead of doing an automated validation, we're going to do a manual validation by any member of the ops team. And that's going to complete this release. For today's demonstration, we're going to deploy the Fabricam Fiber website. Now I don't have 3 machines, but I'm representing the 3 different machines, dev, UAT, and production, as different virtual directories within an IIS. Obviously in real life you'll have different machines for your different environments. You can see here in a particular folder I have 3 subfolders: dev, prod, and UAT. These are then the folders that are the virtual directories within IIS. You can see that dev lives on port 8000, QA on port 9000, and production on port 10,000 within this IIS. Let's go and configure release management so that we can set up a deployment pipeline to these 3 environments. I'm going to open up the release management console. There's a few things we want to do. Under my profile, I can set settings for myself, like whether or not I want to receive email notifications and what domain user account identifies me. Let's go to Manage Users and add a couple of users. I'm going to add a new user for the build account, and the build account is VSALM Lab Service. It's not going to receive any email notification, and it is a service user. This will be necessary for the build engine to be able to queue releases in release management. Let's save and close that. Let's create a new user, and this time we'll search in Active Directory for VSALM Brian. We'll enter in an email address. We'll subscribe to receive email notifications, and we'll make Brian a release manager. This will give him rights beyond a usual user. We'll save and close that. Let's finally add Julia. And we'll save and close. Let's go over to Manage Groups and create a couple of security groups. We'll add a new group called development team, and we'll link a couple of existing users. Let's select Adam, Julia, and Brian. We'll save and close that. Let's create two more groups, one called QA, and we'll just put Julia and Adam into that group. And let's add another one called Ops Team. And we'll just put Adam and Brian into that group. So we've configured a couple of users and a couple of security groups. Let's go over to Manage Pick Lists, and under Stage Type we're going to add the 3 stages. Our 3 stages are Dev, QA, and Prod. Let's go over to Manage TFS and create a connection to TFS. I'll select New and type in the name of my TFS server, which is VSALM. The project collection name is Fabricam Fiber Collection. And I'm going to connect as administrator. I'll have to click Verify to go and verify the connection. You can see I get an error that says the administrator needs the permission make requests on behalf of others. Let's click OK. And let's open up the TFS administration console. And let's go and set that permission. I'm going to click on the Fabricam Fiber Collection and select Administer Security. I'm going to add an entry for administrator, and about halfway down this list you'll see there's a permission called Make Requests on behalf of others, which I'll allow for the administrator. Now we can verify again, and this time the verification succeeds. We'll save and close. That sets up our connection between this particular release management server and the Team Foundation server on VSALM. Finally, let's have a quick look at settings. Settings will allow you to specify some timeouts, specify the email configuration, as well as deployer settings. We'll leave all of those as defaults. Let's go and look at our inventory. We'll click on the Inventory tab, and under Tools we get a list of tools that come out the box with Release Management. We'd be able to create new tools here by just simply clicking New, giving the tool a name and description, adding the executable or script that we want to execute for this particular tool, and configuring any parameters. We won't do that for now. Let's look at the Xcopy deployer. The Xcopy deployer is a wrapper to copy files from a source location to an installation folder for a given component. The wrapper is necessary because of the way release management handles error codes from tools. You can see there's an argument here, installation path __. The double underscore before and after lets release management know that this is a parameter. Here you can see the CMD file that was uploaded as the executable for this custom tool. Let's look at our actions. These are all the actions that come out the box with Release Manager. Let's scroll down and look at the copy files or folder action. Here we can see the action uses the Xcopy deployer tool, sets a default timeout to 5 minutes, and introduces a further 2 parameters, source file folder and destination file folder. These will be used inside of the workflow to specify the source and destination folder. Let's go and look at configuring paths. When you first open up the Release Paths page, if you haven't done all the configuration necessary for configuring paths, you'll get this wizard that will guide you through some of the prerequisites for configuring paths. You can see we've done most of the basics. Now we can skip over to number 2, which is paths, where we would add servers and environments. I'm going to click on the servers link to bring me to that page. We'll add a new server in, and we'll call this server VSALM. We'll give it a DNS name. We'll specify a gateway for the IP address type. We can select an owner if you want to. Let's make Adam the owner of this machine. We can specify a description and notes for this machine as well. Let's hit save. We've now created a server that we can deploy to. I've already gone and deployed the release management agent onto that machine. Let's now go to environments and create our environments. We'll create a new environment called env dev. Again, we can specify an owner. Let's make it Adam. And again, we can specify a description and notes if we want to. We're going to link an existing server. We've already got the VSALM server, so we'll just link that in. If we had additional servers that made up the dev environment, we could just simply link them here. Let's save and close that. Let's do the same thing for env QA. And again, we'll link the VSALM machine. And typically you wouldn't link the same machine into different environments, but for the purposes of this demonstration we can do that. And env prod also has VSALM. So we've set up our 3 environments. Now when we return to release paths, you'll see that the wizard has disappeared and we're able to specify a release path. Let's click new to create a new release path. We'll call this Fabricam Fiber, and we can optionally type in a description. We'll leave it blank for now. Let's go and add 3 stages. The first stage is dev, second stage is QA, and the final stage is prod. Let's select the environments for each of those stages: dev, QA, and prod respectively. We'll automate the acceptance steps as well as the validation steps for both dev and QA. Let's make the development team responsible for deployment, acceptance, and validation within the dev environment. Similarly, we'll make the QA team responsible for those 3 phases within the QA stage. And finally, we'll make the ops team responsible for acceptance, deployment, and validation. We want to make sure that there's a manual approval between each stage. So let's go and add an approver. We'll select Adam to do the approval after dev, which will kick off the deployment into QA. Let's also make Adam the approver for the QA stage. That's then going to put in a deployment request which needs to be accepted here, since the acceptance step is not automated for the production environment. Let's save that. Now that we've defined our release path, we're going to want to create a build. The final layout of the build binaries is going to affect configuring our application. So we want to make sure we know exactly what the structure of the output folder is going to be. Let's open up Visual Studio, and here I've got the code for the Fabricam Fiber call center from source control, and I've opened up that solution. This is a web solution with some class libraries and test projects. Let's go to the Team Explorer, and before we create a new build definition, we're going to need to import the release management build workflow. This is the workflow that will allow us to trigger a deployment from within a Team Foundation Server build. Let's click on the Build Process Templates folder and click the link to open up the local path. Then I'm going to browse to Release Management Bin. Inside here, there's a Release Default Template 11.1 XAML. I'm going to copy that into the folder with my other build templates and import that into source control. Click the Add button. It's picked up the new file, and we'll click Finish, and finally we'll check that in. type in importing RN template as the comment and hit check-in. Now we can create a new build. Let's go back to the builds page and create a new build definition. We'll call this Fab Fiber Release. We'll leave the trigger as manual for now. And under source settings, we're going to simply browse to the folder that contains our solution, which is this dev folder under Fabricam Fiber. For build defaults, we'll create drops in a drop folder, and under process, we'll specify the build process template. In this case, we're going to select new, and we're going to browse to the build process template folder, and here we're going to use the release default template 11.1. Now because we've got this dev solution open, the build parameter is picking up that that's the solution we want to build. We can specify build number format differences if we want to. It's always a good idea to index your sources, so let's do that. And here you can see there's a section for releasing. We're not going to release to the build yet, so I'm going to leave release to build as false. Finally, under advanced, I'm just going to specify an MS build argument, Visual Studio version, that's simply an artifact of this machine, so you shouldn't have to do that in your builds. Let's save that build definition. Let's go back to the Team Explorer and queue the Fab Fiber release build. Our build is completed. So let's go and open up the drop folder. You can see there's a folder called _published websites. And if we go in there, we can see the fabricamfiber.website. This is where we want to copy from. Let's keep this _published websites folder in mind as we move back to release management. Let's go to configure apps. I'm going to move to components, and we're going to create a new component. This is the Fab Fiber website. We can give it a description if we want to. And here we can specify that this builds with the application. The build definition is inherited from the release template, and we're going to use this location, path to package, to find where to get the source files from. Let's go and look at the relative path from our build drop location. This folder here, Fabricam Fiber Release, is the build drop location. So we want to go into _published websites and then into Fabricam Fiber Web. So let's copy those last two paths. Next we'll move over to deployment. And for the deployment, we're going to use the xcopy deployer. For now, that's all we're going to do. So we'll hit save and close. We've now created the Fab Fiber website component. With that, we can go over to the release template and create a release template. We'll hit new, and this is Fab Fiber Release. And for the release path, we'll select the Fabricam Fiber release path. For the build definition, we'll specify the Fab Fiber release as the build definition, and we'll enable can trigger release from a build. We're then presented with a workflow designer surface where we can create the workflow for each stage in our pipeline. Let's start off with the dev deployment sequence. We're going to select a server and drag the server into the deployment sequence to specify that the actions are going to occur on this particular server. Of course, if we had multiple servers and we wanted to do different actions on those servers, we'd have to specify a server activity for each server we want to deploy to. Let's start off by removing any current website. So we'll go to the IIS Tools, select Remove Website, and we'll drop in a Remove Website. I'll expand that, and here you can see there's a parameter called site name. In dev, this is Fabricam Fiber Dev. That's the name of the site that's hosted on port 8000. Then we're going to do a backup. So let's do a file copy. So we'll select copy file or folder activity. Again, we'll expand that, and here we'll specify the source folder. So we want to copy out the files from Fabricam in release website dev, which is where our virtual directory is pointing to, into the backup folder. Next, we're going to install our website. Well, we've created a component for that, so into the toolbox I'll add the Fabricam Fiber website component. We'll drag on the Fab Fiber website, and when we expand that, you can see we have a variable called installation path. The installation path is the Fabricam Fiber in release website dev folder. Then we're going to want to create the website again in IIS. The website we want to create is called Fabricam Fiber Dev. The port number is 8000, and the physical path is Fabricam Fiber in release website dev. Finally, we'll add a rollback action, which will allow us to specify any error handling actions in case something goes wrong. For the rollback, we're going to want to copy the files back from the backup folder and create the website again. So we'll drag on the copy file, and this time we'll copy from the backup folder to the site folder, and then we can copy and paste the create website activity. I'll just hit Control C and Control V. We've now set up the workflow for the dev environment. This is actually going to be exactly the same for the other environments, barring the port number and the paths. So I'll just select VSALM, hit Control C to copy the entire activity, and paste it here in the QA stage. Then we'll just move through and change dev to UAT. Okay. We'll do the same thing for prod. We've now set up our workflow to move our application from dev to QA to prod. We can now go and change our build to actually queue the release. Let's go back to Visual Studio, and we'll edit the Fabricam Fiber release build definition. And here under release build, we'll set it to true. This will trigger the release workflow as soon as the build is completed. Before we queue a new build, let's go and change our code just to make sure we can track the changes through our pipeline. I'm going to come to the Solution Explorer and just open up the layout view. And here for this H2, I'm going to change it from support to support RM. Let's go and check that change in. And let's go and queue a new build. Here you can see the command to trigger the release management workflow. The build completed successfully. Let's go and track this release in Release Manager. We'll go over to Releases, and here we can see that there's been some traffic in the dev stage. We'll double click here to open it up, and here you can see that the build triggered this particular release. We can see that the template is the Fab Fiber release template. We can see the build is 2013-0709.2 of Fabricam Fiber release, and we can see it's currently in the dev stage. The current step is approve release. If we open up step details, we can see that it was accepted in deployment, it was deployed, and validate deployment has occurred. Those are all automated steps for this stage. The approve release is sitting with Adam and is pending. Let's go and check the Fabricam Fiber dev site to make sure that the deployment was successful. I'm going to come to port 8000, which is our dev environment, and just refresh the Fabricam Fiber page. And there you can see it says support RM now. We're now happy that the dev deployment occurred successfully. So we can go to the approval. There's two places where Adam can do the approval. He can either do it from the Release Management Console by going to My Approval Requests, or he can do it from the website. Let's open up the website to see what the approval looks like there. I'll open up a new browser and browse to VSALM port 1000/release management. That's the default port for release management and is specified when you configure release management. Again, we can see that there's an approval waiting. If we click on this dev square here, we can see exactly which steps have been executed so far for this stage. We can see there's a to approve waiting for Adam to approve the step. We can also click next stage to see what's going to happen in the following stage. Let's go ahead and approve this request. We'll enter in the comment of dev is okay and hit approve. That's going to then trigger the next stage. Let's go back to Release Manager so we can see where the release is now. We'll go back to Traffic Overview, and here under QA traffic you can see we now have some traffic in the QA environment. Let's double click to open it up, and now you'll see that we're waiting to approve the release in the QA stage. Again, we can see that the acceptance, deployment, and validation have completed, and the release is now pending an approval, again by Adam. Let's go and refresh the web page. And here we can see the next approval. Let's go and make sure the QA deployment was successful before we do the approval. Let's go and refresh port 9000, which is our QA environment, and we can see that it says support RM. We can go ahead and approve this to go into the prod stage. Now you'll see that we're immediately waiting for acceptance in the prod stage. This is the first stage where we haven't automated the acceptance into that stage. When we hit approve, we have two choices. We can deploy immediately, or we can do a deferred deployment. If I click in deferred deployment, I can set the date and time when I want the deployment to kick off. We'll select current for now, or we can leave it empty. Going to prod, and we'll click approve. That will then kick off the workflow into production. Let's go back to release management to see where we are. Let's open up step details, and you can see that we're now sitting at the validation, which is pending and a validation by anyone from the ops team. Let's go and validate that the production deployment occurred successfully. And there we can see support RM in production, which is on port 10,000, and so we can approve that. Now that we've moved successfully through our pipeline, I wanted to show you how you can do configuration per environment. For this, I'm going to use a combination of web deployment config transforms and some tokenization from release management. Let's go back to our website and open up the web config file. Here I've added a key called demoenv, and the value is set to development inside the web config. If I expand the web config in the Solution Explorer, I'll have web debug and web release. These are config transforms. Let's go and add a config transform for our application settings. Here I'm going to use the in-release token to represent a parameter. So we'll call this environment name. Now I'm going to use config transforms. In order to do that, I need to specify an XDT transform, in this case set attributes, as well as an XDT locator, which in this case is going to be a match on key. When this config transform fires, it's going to find the app setting with the key demoenv and set the attributes. Let's save that. And because we did this in the release config, we're going to want to make sure that our build is building the release configuration. Let's go and edit the build. I'll right click the build and edit the build definition, and we'll go to the top and we'll specify under items to build the configuration, and we'll add a new configuration for release any CPU. That'll make sure we're building the release configuration. There's a couple of other tweaks we're going to need to go through just to make sure that we get the right layout and the right substitution from web deploy. Here are the build arguments that we're going to customize. We're going to specify deploy and build equal to true, so that web deploy will fire when we build the web application. Usually web deploy creates a zip file out of the website, but we're going to tell it not to do that since we're copying the files manually. So we'll specify packages single file equal to false. Web deploy also automatically parameterizes the connection strings, which we're not going to do in this case. So we'll set auto parameterization web config connection strings to false. And finally, the temp dir that web deploy uses by default can be extremely long, and sometimes you'll hit the path too long error. So we'll specify a different package temp dir by going back several levels and then into a publish folder. Let's copy all of those arguments into the MS build arguments for our build. Let's turn release to build off just so we can see what the build outputs look like for this particular build. Let's also make sure we have everything checked in. Adding parameter to web.config, and let's go and queue a build. Our build is completed. Let's open up the drop folder so we can see what the drop folder looks like. Again, we've got the underscore published websites folder, and inside there we have a folder called Fabricam Fiber web underscore package. Then we have a folder called archive, and under there content, and there you can see eventually we get to our publish folder. Now inside this publish folder is the website that web deploy would have packaged up for us. Let's open up the web config and see what the web config looks like. Here you can see that web deploy has triggered the config transform and added this token environment name as the value for demoenv. Let's go and update our release management workflow to see how we can do the substitution when we're deploying. Let's go back to release management and let's go and edit our Fabricam Fiber website component. We're no longer getting the website from the Fabricam Fiber web folder underneath _published websites. We're going a little bit deeper in. So let's go and find the relative path to this publish folder. So we'll copy everything right up to publish from within our drop folder. That now sets the correct folder within our build drop location to get our published website. We'll then move over to configuration variables and specify the variable replacement mode as after installation. The extension file filter will be star.config, and the name we want to replace is environment name. Let's then go back to our release template and specify that substitution. Now you'll see if we come to the FabFiber website component in our workflow, there's an additional parameter called environment name. So we'll specify dev in the dev stage, QA in the QA stage, and prod in the prod stage. Let's go and queue a build and make sure that the substitution works. We'll come back to our build definition and set the release build to true. Let's go and queue that build. Our build is completed. Let's go and check the deployment. Here we can see that there's a second deployment from our .4 build, which is currently in the dev stage, waiting for approval of the release. Let's go and check that the website deployed correctly. You can see that it did. There's not going to be any visible changes, but let's go and check the web config. So here's the dev folder for the dev Fabricam Fiber site. So I'll just drag this web config and open it up in Visual Studio. And there you can see the value dev for the dev environment. Let's go and approve that and see that the QA environment gets QA. Here we can see that the traffic has increased to 2 in the QA stage, and we can see that again we're approving the release. So let's go up to the UAT folder and open up the web config file from the UAT folder. And there you can see that the value QA has been substituted in there. Thank you so much for attending today's webcast. I'll now hand over to Becky, who will tell you some more about our upcoming events and special offers.
Thank you, Colin. If you'd like to know more, if you enjoyed our webcast today and are interested in adopting Microsoft's automated build and release management tools, Imaginet can help. Imaginet offers a Visual Studio automated build and release management 10-day quick start. This quick start is designed to get your team up and running with Microsoft's automated build and deployment tools, as well as release management best practices. It includes automated build development and execution using your application. Support and training for your team is also included, as well as a high-level ALM assessment to ensure that the automated build and release management processes fit well into your overall application lifecycle management vision. If you're interested, just email us at info@imaginet.com. Imaginet offers a variety of free webcasts and events. To get information on or to register for any of these free webcasts or events that we have coming up soon, please visit our website at www.imaginet.com/events, We're now covering a variety of topics, including Visual Studio 2013, Team Foundation Server, Application Lifecycle Management, SharePoint, and also Microsoft.NET. In addition, Imaginet has a variety of upcoming training classes. We have an accredited core Kanban using Team Foundation Server 3-day class. These classes are held monthly in Dallas, Texas, and can also be brought on site privately for your company. We also have a testers training class with Microsoft Visual Studio ALM tools. This is a 4-day class and is also held publicly in Dallas, Texas. And again, this class can be brought on site privately for your organization as well. For more information or to register for any of our upcoming classes, visit www.imaginet.com/training. Imaginet offers a huge variety of ALM planning and implementation services. We offer assessment and envisioning workshops, migration planning workshops, and deployment planning workshops. We can also assist you with any of your Team Foundation Server upgrades to the latest version, such as 2013. We also offer remote support and other quick start engagements for lab management, test manager, automated testing, load testing, quality assurance centers of excellence, and test centers of excellence. We also offer integration support for Team Foundation Server to other tools such as Microsoft Project and Quality Center. And finally, you can visit Imaginet's Visual Studio website, and this is truly your one-stop hub for any and all of your Visual Studio needs. Just visit visualstudio.imaginet.com. If you have any questions or need any more information at all, please feel free to contact us at info@imaginet.com or simply by calling 972-607-4830. Thanks again, and we hope to see you on another Imaginet webcast.